Well, first of all, happy International Chess Day, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Puzzle. Today, we have a really fun puzzle, compliments of Pepe. Thank you so much for sharing this inspiring puzzle idea. Now, with black to move, we're going to notice there's a race here. Two pawns racing to the promotion square, and so we're going to talk about that quite a bit. And if we look at the material count, we'll notice that white does have an extra pawn, but black has an extra knight. So we're up material, and where do we go from here? Well, we'll often talk about forcing moves first, right? Well, in an endgame, it's not always so forcing, meaning there isn't always like an easy way to attack the king. And in fact, it looks like our knight is hanging. So what do we look at first? Well, I think there's kind of a forcing sort of channel of play, meaning in the endgame, when we're talking about a race, what's the path of least resistance here? I push my pawn, I'm ready to promote, and white needs to respond quickly, otherwise we're going to promote the pawn, and the queen is going to take home the full point. So white will also want to march forward with the pawn. I can then cross the finish line, so to speak, and promote the pawn into a queen, and then white can respond in kind. So here we sort of looked at the forcing channel of play, right? I pushed my pawn forward, white pushed their pawn forward, I promoted, white promoted. Now with black to move, we are up a piece, so it might feel like there isn't a huge sense of urgency. Like if I don't find a great move here, I'm still up a piece. But incredibly, the engine is spitting zeros here, saying it's a dead draw. And one theme I kind of want to point out here is notice when white promoted the pawn into a queen, the queen is now aligned with its own king on the long light square diagonal. So a really tempting move here to kind of point out is queen to h1. We're skewering the king to its own queen, but the problem here, even though our X-ray vision is looking brilliantly down the long diagonal, notice the knight is defending the queen. So white can simply capture our knight. There goes our extra knight. And notice now if we try to capture the queen, well, now white's knight happily collects our queen, and we're not making any progress here. You know, we can fork the king and the pawn, and this kind of fizzles out into a draw. So the most forcing channel of play isn't quite working out. The interested viewer can kind of play around with other moves, but the main point, our king is exposed. So even if we just try to keep everything together and say, hey, I'm up a knight, things feel great, well, unfortunately, white has plenty of counterplay. White can attack our king, and if we say attack the knight, just as an example, knight d7 would be one idea, and it's just not enough to win. Our king is too exposed, no way to make progress here. Now going back, I think the most important thing as we're looking at sort of the most forcing path in the position, going back to the point where we promoted and white promoted, we have a really good theme here. The alignment between the king and the queen, and queen h1 is nearly winning its rival, meaning once the king is forced to move out of harm's way, we're nearly winning the queen, if not for the knight. So this gives us kind of a clue. Maybe we could find a way to evict the knight so that if the knight, say, you know, let me make a random move and the knight moves away, if we could set up this kind of a dynamic, well, then we would win the queen, right? And so how could we possibly make that come true? Well, let's resurface. Let's start at the beginning. We have a really nice idea. I want to promote. I want to meet white promoting with a skewer winning the queen. Could we try to make this idea come true? Well, one idea to try to make this dream come true is to immediately confront the knight. Now, the problem here is white is actually gaining an extra move in the race, meaning we pushed our pawn first, we were ready to promote, but since we moved the king, now white could, move the knight and attack the king, but also to the point would be just to promote the pawn and say, okay, now what? If you take me, well, now I win the race and I have the extra queen, your king is exposed. This is a big problem for black. So moving the king is a little bit slow. Now, on the other hand, how could I attack the knight in such a way that if the pawn moved forward, trying to gain kind of that extra step in the race, that I could capture the knight and deal with the promotion of the pawn? And the way we can do that is by moving our knight to c4, maybe less likely a4. So here, I would think about knight to c4 first. I'm safely attacking the knight. So if you try to get a lead in the race, well, now I just win the knight, I guard the promotion square, and we're going to win the game. So that's not going to work out for white. But the problem here is that white can capture the knight. And we say that's a problem, but it doesn't really feel like a problem, right? The knight is going to move to a dark square. And so wherever the knight lands, it's always attacking the opposite color from where it stands. And here, it's going to move on a dark square on the next move. So if I push the pawn, well, the knight's moving to a dark square where it would attack a light square, but there's no way to prevent the promotion of the pawn. Well, that's true, but the knight has a really tricky move that saves the day. Knight to d2. And the idea here is that if we promote the pawn, now the knight anticipates the promotion with a very nice sting in the tail, or fork in the tail, in this case, forking the queen and the king. So we're going to lose our queen, and then white's going to promote. Not good. So going back, well, okay, fine. Don't allow knight b3 then, right? Well, we could play king c3, attacking the knight, but now the knight is in time to attack our king. And once we move out of harm's way, well, now the pawn advances, we promote, white promotes, and at the end of the day, notice the king, knight, and queen are all lined up together. So even though we can play queen h1, now the king can happily capture the knight. And notice white's knight is blocking our dream on the long diagonal. So this isn't working out either. So going back, knight c4, really good idea, trying to remove the key defender of the promotion square, the knight that guards a8. We're trying to remove it, but knight c4 didn't quite work out because of that really tricky knight dance. Okay, so then another thought would be knight a4, it hangs the knight. Why would I think about that move, right? What about, moving the other knight to d5? This also looks promising because after knight takes knight, we can push the pawn forward. But once again, the knight reigns in our parade. It's not just about defending the promotion square. What if you kind of allow the promotion to exist, stop kind of worrying about the prevention of a promotion that you can't prevent, but anticipate, hey, if there's a queen here, how can I visit Forktown? Knight e2. How do I get there? I work backwards. So now I can play knight f4. And the big problem is I'm going to play knight e2 with check, and there's nothing we can do about it. So once again, we're hitting another dead end. We still are trying to work out this idea of removing the key defender of the anticipated pawn promotion, turning into a queen, so that we could sort of create the skewer and win the queen. So knight d5 didn't work, knight c4 didn't work. Hey, what about that impossible move? The move that I kind of hand-waved away, knight to a4. By asking that question, by resurfacing, realizing all the sensible moves don't seem to quite work out, what about knight a4? What can we do here? And in fact, knight a4 is the winning move in today's puzzle. And the reason why this works is because we're putting the knight on the wrong circuit. The knight is unable to do any fancy dancing this way, and if the pawn pushes, well, then we just capture the knight. So the only real sensible move for white is to capture our knight. And the big difference here is after c2, imagine that same idea. The knight cannot prevent us from promoting, but if the knight could find a forking square like b3, well, that would be great for white, the defender. But here, it's not working out, because if you play knight c5, hoping that we promote and you deliver a fork, well, then I just capture your knight, no problem. So that's going to turn into the same puzzle solution where we're going to promote first, white's going to promote second, and then we're going to have a skewer. So we'll see that in just a moment. And basically, there's no way to prevent us from promoting the pawn. There's no way to find a clever fork trick. So the puzzle continues by advancing the pawn forward. We cross the finish line first, promoting the pawn into a queen. White completes their race as well, promoting the pawn into a queen. And now the grand finale. The king and queen are aligned on the long diagonal, so we can swing over to the corner, skewering the king, kind of a reverse pin, the more valuable pieces in front and the less valuable pieces behind it. We skewer the king to its queen, we x-ray the potential there, and when the king captures the queen, now we climb down that diagonal staircase, we capture the newly promoted queen, entering a completely winning ending. So once again, happy International Chess Day. Thanks again to Pepe for sharing yet again an inspiring, really